Welcome Wargamers to the second video in my Dawnbringer series, specifically Book 1, covering the assault that's about to happen on this city of Hammerhall. And when I say city, I mean city with a little plural thing next to it because we're talking about Hammerhall. Akshi and Ghyran, or Gyra rather, are both being attacked simultaneously, but the way that this book is laid out, we tackle these stories one at a time, and that is exactly how I'm going to handle it. So in today's video, we're going to talk all about the assault that is happening on Hammerhall-Ghyra. It is certainly the most thrilling plot thread that we left off with yesterday in terms of its urgency, and so it's exactly where I wanted to dive in first. Now before I do that, I do have two big announcements here that I want to throw up top. The first one is I am turning off ads going forward for my videos. YouTube monetization is just making them unwatchable with how many ads they try to jam in. I'm turning it all off, so it would mean the absolute world to me if you would consider supporting the channel through the use of my affiliate link down below. Not Just Gaming is an awesome local store in the US that also sells stuff online, so you're supporting a small family business, Mon Pa shop, and they have great deals, not just on Games Workshop stuff, but tons of hobby supplies, so if there's anything you're looking for your next project, using the link down below throws a tip in my tip jar, big or small. It goes to supporting me, my wife, our cats, the whole channel, and I thank you so much. The second quick thing here is that I'm now a member of the Goonhammer media team. So what that means basically is if you want to learn more about how to play Age of Sigmar or the coverage of different campaign missions and things like that, Goonhammer is a great resource for tactical guides, list building ideas, and just kind of like op-ed pieces about pretty much any game under the sun, so go check those guys out there. And with that, let's move our story back to the forests of Ghyran. If you'll remember, the Shutter Blight Plague is a huge rainstorm that is going on over Hammerhall-Ghyra. It brings despondency and apathy to the point of people just sitting down and letting themselves die. To combat this, Alarielle came in screaming by bringing her own waterfall, basically redirected a waterfall on top of the city in rain sprinkler mode, I guess she has that shower head setting, and starts washing away all of the contaminant. So she doesn't shut down the Nurgle spell, right? She doesn't roll to unbind it or whatever. She instead just casts something else. And so as our perspective shifts to Ghyran, we begin to notice that yes, indeed, the Shutter Blight Plague is being done by Nurgle. Of course, that was kind of what the cities assumed. Specifically, though, it's being conducted by a group of Harbingers of Decay. These are premier Nurgle champions, and their lore is kind of steeped in myth of on the 7th month of the 7th day of the 7th year, we bring a baby, and sometimes they'll have a birthmark on him, and then a different Harbinger of Decay will come and take the child, and into the woods, and then they grow up to be a Harbinger of Decay. Basically, they're essentially battle wizards for Nurgle that act as sort of loci for his pestilence. Mortal champions with godlike powers that kind of trail around their wake. And our story essentially shows these same events from their side, which I really do enjoy. And we learned that, even though our perspective as readers has pivoted to Shyish and then Gur all over the place, the war in Ghyran never stopped. The whole war of life that started in the Age of Myth has never ceased. The Sylvaneth are always losing ground, Nurgle always pushing. They've had much more back and forth since Alarielle's come back, carved out a lot of territory, but the fight never stopped. But at some point, a Varangard from Archaon, the Ever-Chosen, comes over to this group of Harbingers of Decay, their order or society, however they organize, and basically says, call every single Harbinger that you have to me ASAP. Okay, so the call goes out, brings in as much as they can to their base, and he essentially puts together a plan. And he has the authority to direct these Harbingers because he is a Varangard. He's a champion and emissary of Archaon, the Ever-Chosen, carries his seal so he can command Nurgle forces. And what he essentially does is sends out the Harbingers to lap the entire city. They go every direction. So the entire city, Hammerhall-Ghyra, as massive as it is encircled by multiple medium-sized warbands, we'll say, that are not trying to be obvious. They're trying to be a little bit subtle, which is not Nurgle's thing. And so the plan is essentially you surround their perimeter, come in from different directions, And they're going to use each town that they approach as this perimeter, as the net closes, right? Every town that a warband comes into contact with, we're going to burn it and use it as a ritual point to enhance the Shudder's Blight storm. So the storm is getting more intense as they are raising villages and the net is closing. So it's like this bullseye is intensifying, like focusing like a laser beam until it's right on top of Hammerhall-Ghyra, which is a really good plan. Because the idea is it culminates in an uber ritual that uses the city itself, Hammerhall-Ghyra, as a ritual point to unleash Nurgle demons into the realm and just make the city absolutely undefendable. And so, like we said, this preliminary part begins with the Shudder Blight Plague, a subtle way for Nurgle to shut down operations, right? He's not making a big scene, it's just the industry is slowing down. The guards are a bit more lax. Almost like, and this is kind of the best way I can describe it, is it's like turning the alarm off, right? If you've ever seen those old medieval videos, if you could like run up in your Mordheim mission and cut the rope of a bell that was supposed to ring and alarm everybody, they're hosed. And we're given a sense of how one of these smaller satellite cities in Ghyran falls as this net is kind of dragging close. They actually kind of give us a little example with one city. So essentially, first this wave of apathy comes over the entire town. Stuff just gets hard to do. Taking care of yourself becomes difficult. All of a sudden, sickness and disease. Everything with Nurgle is kind of weighted in waves of 7, so probably 7 different poxes probably invade your town. It takes 7 days. The attack happens. Then they're going to build a giant filth pit, which is a thing that's mentioned a few times in the lore, which is exactly what it sounds like. Part Nurgle ritual location, church steeple, outhouse, plague repository, all of it. Plant a garden of Nurgle at this point, and then move on to the next city. Again, that's happening all around Ghyran, and the perimeter is closing. And so from the perspective of Hammerhall, things are just going dark in every direction. You have the forerunners of the disease kind of like seeping into the city, but the momentum is building for Nurgle as this net closes, which is the big thing, is that it's kind of like a snowball. It gets worse the longer it can go on. However, from the perspective of the Harbingers of Decay, one thing is really strange. There's one thing they don't like about this whole situation, is that the reports that they're getting from the northern section of Hammerhall-Ghyra are having complications. It's almost like that part of the net has kind of stalled. There's a gap in their line. Before this gap appeared, they were receiving odd reports of cities being found entirely murdered, feasted upon. Same reports that we saw from Hammerhall-Ghyra in the last video, of like some name Sir Gerian scribbled into the walls. So it doesn't, I mean, something seems to be slowing down the magicalness of this plague storm, but the Nurgle armies just keep walking up and finding already dead towns. So that's really strange. And then a second complication to the Varangard's grand plan for Gyra comes in, and that is Alarielle herself. She began her own rainstorm at this point, and what's known as the Duel of the Rains begins. Now remember, this is helping kind of like hold off the dam, if you will, of Nurgle infestation, but Alarielle's spell isn't enough to like counteract all of this. It doesn't shut it down, it just kind of puts a band-aid on the situation. But is enough of a threat to the plan going smoothly that the Harbingers of Decay and the Varangard who are there with them decided, we need more muscle. And so they called out 2 very particular heroes of Nurgle. Again, we're in Ghyran. These are easily accessible and highly motivated. The first one is one of my absolute favorites, Rodrigos the Rainfather. This is the named Great Unclean One mini. I love his lore, his background. He brings natural blight storms with him everywhere he goes, and he added his demon hordes to the mass. And again, he has a big focus on spellcasting and stuff like that, so he intensifies what was already going on. And wherever Rodrigos went, Alarielle's defenses did nothing, right? Like he had like the magnifying glass laser pointer of plague stuff, and Alarielle gave a little protection to a huge area, but if the concentrated power of Rodrigos or a Harbinger fell on your specific town, you were done. And so that resumes like the military progress part of things, But the second call that they sent out went to Blowab Rotspawn, who, if you don't know, is an incredibly interesting character from Age of Sigmar history. He was back in the old world and then brought forward, but essentially he is a champion of Nurgle that is so consumed with flies and bugs that he has become the horde, right? He's become the whole nest of bugs. They literally just writhe under his skin and make him look like he's a person. Now, he is the bugs and the bugs are him. He has immortal sentience and he can talk to people or whatever like that, but he's gross. He's a cool dude. And basically, they asked him to use his abilities. Hey, you're a bug guy. Talk to the bugs and see what's happening up north. Because not only are they trying to deal with the military setbacks, but they're also trying to investigate what happened up north. Like, before Aloriel came in and put us on a side quest, something else was already going on. Figure out what that was. So, one of the Heralds of Decay goes out with a battle force named Volgoth the Miser, and they send him out to go see some more pestilence and plagues and figure out what's going on up north, along with the information that we're getting from Blowab. And Volgoth has an idea. So he goes to a city that is on the northern edge of where all these weird things are happening. He finds a small city of Sigmar, like Dawnbringer Crusade had established a little outpost. He takes the place, kills all of them very, very quickly. Like, forget the plagues. Kill everybody very fast. Resets it up to make it look like it's all perfectly normal and uses it as a trap. It's like, we're going to figure out what was going on. What came and killed all these people. And then we're going to kill it. And so they keep the fires going all night. They're just sitting, waiting, and listening. And it's not until dawn that stuff gets weird. While the last little clinging shadows of dawn were still covering them, an army begins to move towards the town. And from a distance, the Nurgle guys are looking at these, and they're in these nice, tight, rigid formations. They're perceived as ranks of men-at-arms and these big royal knights. And as they begin to walk out of this kind of depression in the earth and into the sunlight, again, as the sun is rising, the sunlight is revealing the darkness, it becomes clear these were flesh-eater courts. Them boys who are all lined up are really gross. Those things that you thought were knights weren't people sitting on top of a horse. That was just a gnarly-looking tall guy. Which is a threat that the Nurgle forces were certainly not expecting. Like, they were like, oh, okay, this is totally random. But in the Flesh-Eater courts, from their perspective, of course, they see themselves as royal knights. If you're not familiar with that faction, go check out my Flesh-Eater court series. I adore that faction. But essentially, they perceive themselves as holy knights and warriors who, like, stepped out of medieval times, and they perceive the Nurgle guys as being the invader, which, of course, they are, but they wouldn't know the difference. All they see is the Nurgle boys as trying to colonize a land that did not belong to them. And so the two engage in battle, and I will say the fight scene here is pretty epic. You have, like, crypt flayers just hurling themselves and tackling Blight drone riders. At one point, the Harbinger of Decay sends out, like, a literally blaster of despair. Like, he puts his arms up and, like, I just imagine, like, a green storm just, like, exploding out from his hands. And it is so strong that it momentarily breaks many of the Flesh-Eater courts from their delusion. Meaning whatever psychic grasp the vampire in charge has over them flickered for a second. So some of them just looked at the mid-fight, were just like, what am I doing to myself? And then just got murdered because they paused for a minute. Some of them just sat down and just let themselves die because they were like, oh, I don't want to be on either side of this fight. Which is just such an interesting thing. It's one of those things you don't think about, is how, if you can just give someone momentary perspective, how disorienting that is for a Flesh-Eater court's army. What an interesting weapon. And I was reading that, I was like, oh man, that was really freaking cool. This couldn't get any better. And then the Flesh-Eater court leader does the exact same thing. The way that I would describe this in game terms is that they took turns using their once per game artifacts, is how I would literally write that, because the Flesh-Eater court guy has like a little gem on his necklace or whatever. He snaps it off, holds it up, and this essentially puts out a blast of necromantic magic. Again, it's like these dueling powers, what is saturating the battlefield. I don't know if they both took the same universal item upgrade on the list or what, but now it's reflected back at them. This blasts the delusion of the Flesh-Eater courts back onto the Maggotkin. So everybody is getting a taste of everybody's medicine. Like, for a split second, imagine you're a Maggotkin guy and you're seeing a little creepy, gnarly looking ghoul in front of you. You swing the axe down, and then for the briefest moment, because someone behind you let off this bomb, he looks like a man-at-arms. He looks royal, and you're like, am I the bad guy? Why am I attacking him? Which I just, again, love the idea of that. It was kind of funny to see them use each other's items though back to back. It was a humorous thing. It was definitely a I'm going to use Finest Hour. Oh yeah, well, you didn't kill me? I'm going to use Finest Hour. But one thing that becomes apparent as the Flesh Eater Court power, whatever item he has, blasts away like the hold that Nurgle has on the battlefield, it also reveals that this is what's pushing away the Shutter Blight Plague. So now the Harbinger knows. And honestly, this is more of a scouting party because they just needed to figure out what was happening. Now the Harbinger has what he came to figure out. He knows what causes the delay. And so Volgoth, seeing what is going on, like his guys are not doing good. The whole section of this book is just called Despair and Delusion, which sounds like a rough folks for these combos. You know, they're not doing good. So he decides to just bounce. Volgoth does the mental math, and he just tears out of there, concedes full victory points, ducks out, because the point of this battle is already decided. They're going to lose, the Nurgle guys. How long it takes, I don't know. They brought a scouting party against a full army, but they got what they came for, minor victory. Now, it's important to remember that from this storytelling that we've been talking about today, this is mostly from the Nurgle army perspective, but if we're looking at it from the lens of what's happening from Hammerhall-Ghyra, they're looking at this and just seeing weird things happening everywhere around them. There's a break in the supernatural plague storm to the north, so maybe that area is more secure, but also cities are going silent there. The most important thing, though, that the fight between the Flesh Eater Courts and the Maggotkin provides is time, right? All the distractions that the Flesh Eater Courts army is causing, Sir Ghyran, is slowing down the Nurgle plans, and they're already not fast boys to begin with. This gives Hammerhall-Ghyra time to reinforce. They get some Hallowed Knights sent in there, some reinforcements. Again, they put the call out for all of their citizens to come back from their satellite cities, so some are being left to be destroyed, others are pulling in and refortifying, and we're setting ourselves up for quite a siege. And so let's end this video talking about why is this cool, the story half segment that happens in Hammerhall-Ghyra. I adore campaign books for this reason. I love when there's a sequence of games that are meant to like set up a huge attacker-defender battle. I'm a sucker for attacker-defender stuff, just because I like the idea of like heroic last stands and just outlast each other, that kind of thing. It's really cool. And we get such little information about the cities of Sigmar, like the literal cities. I'm really hoping in the next segments of this series that they'll bring out maps of Akshi, maps of Gyra, that kind of stuff. Not only for us, but also for the role-playing benefits of things like Soulbound, which is the role-playing game that these guys do. And what we kind of touched on in the last video is that we're looking at the setup for a counterpunch, right? There's a plan, there's some setbacks, and we enlisted more help. That's really what happened on the Gyra front. The one thing I'll say, though, is that this is a lot of preparation for not a lot of action. Like, the battles are cool, the net's coming close, and the anticipation is building. I really would have loved to see them, like, at least move to assault on Hammerhall, but I'll just have to wait. But it does make me exceptionally excited for what's coming out. Now I'm going to do a dedicated video for each of the heroes. Like, they have like a lore page for the Harbinger of Decay, all of the new heroes that they brought out with this series. But honestly, it's just fluff text and there's not a lot of information there. Honestly, there's really not a lot of new anything about any of them. But this is clearly a book that's meant to introduce the mercenary system, and that's fine. The lines are being drawn, the forces are set. I suspect that the Flesh Eater Courts will be hired by the forces of Order to help fight Nurgle. This is again my theory crafting, my suspicion. Nurgle will likely get some other kind of thing to help them. Maybe, I don't know, throw a character out for Beast of Chaos or Skaven. They'll get some help and we'll just keep adding more armies like that. Which, as long as the stories are compelling, I'm super into. Let me know your thoughts, where you'd like to see the story go down below. I will follow up with you there. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and I'll catch you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming.